Good afternoon, good morning, and good evening, everybody, and welcome to Thursday SecDataOps. I'm gonna bring Jon in. Most of you guys know Jon. Jon's been a staple on the stream, years in the past. What's going on, buddy? Glad to have you back.
What it is, homie.
What's going on? I gotta say, Jon, one of the best things that I love about streaming is the reactions to chat when you choose the music. And I don't know if you were watching chat. I don't know if chat shows up for you when in the green room or whatnot. But okay, good. So you saw everybody's reaction to the music. There was definitely some. But surprisingly, I got a Slack from somebody at work who was like, "Neal, are you angry today? Interesting choice of music."
I like it better than the rap, honestly.
Yeah. I could definitely say I think chat is kind of split between the two, because you've got some people who are they're all hyped for the rap morning musics, and then I've got a group that's all hyped whenever I do the metal music. So I'm kind of split between the two as well. I like them both, but
need to go in between and play some shoegaze.
I don't want to get DMCA'd. I gotta keep it. Yeah. I gotta search for the free stuff.
True, yeah.
I would actually pull out Korn. If I wasn't worried about getting, DMCA'd, I would definitely do some Korn.
I hear you there.
Yeah.
I wouldn't mind that.
Yeah. Cyber Enigma, SecDataOps hype. Thank you very much for the 7 stream streak. Speaking of SecDataOps, Jon and I are here today for this week's SecDataOpsCast. So thanks everybody for tuning in. I'm gonna hit some rules real quick. I almost said some words. I'm gonna do some words, but I'm gonna do some rules first for some words as well. So first and foremost, obviously, keep chat free of any racist, sexist, misogynistic, elitist, or otherwise toxic behavior. We have a zero tolerance policy for anything, toxicity related, which is pretty much just kind of like the stuff that I mentioned there. We like to keep chat free of any of those things. And to that end, we do have moderators in chat. Huge shout out and thanks to our moderators. They keep things running smoothly across all the platforms that we're streaming, YouTube, LinkedIn, Twitch, and X. So huge shout out to moderators for keeping things running smoothly there. Moderators are not here to stifle chat by any stretch of the imagination. Moderators are here to keep chat free of racist, sexist, misogynistic, and elitist behavior, and to encourage you guys to chat with your fellow professionals in each of your respective platforms. With that being said, Jon and I have a topic that we're going to talk about today. But as with anything else, right, we get such a limited amount of time with Jon. And so if we hit on something, or if you want to ask us questions, we do ask that you drop your questions into chat at any point in time. Moderators will grab the chat questions, put them into a queue, and then at any point in time, randomly throughout the stream, you'll see them pop up on the page below. We'll take them, we'll answer them, or we'll laugh at them, or we'll otherwise do something really, really fun with the questions or comments that get placed inside chat. That is one of the values that comes from this or any stream on this channel being live, is that you get access to folks like Jon and myself in real time, which means that none of the things that we are going to talk about here today is scripted by any stretch of the imagination. So who knows what it is we're going to say. Yeah.
You just scared somebody saying that.
I just scared somebody with saying that one. I promise you, we will at least be semi-professional in our stream today. That's what I can promise you today. So I think that's it for the rules, Jon. That's usually what I try to cover down the rules. I think so. How you doing, buddy?
I'm good, man. How are you?
I'm good too. For everybody who has been a longtime viewer of SecDataOps, Jon and I did a stream. God, Jon, it feels like it's been so long ago that we did this topic, and I can't believe it's taken us this time to come around to part 2. But Jon, you and I covered down on a SecDataOps workshop idea that we had. We had started this idea, Jon, because we'd realized that people weren't using security data the way that they needed to. This isn't query related. Let me make something incredibly clear, right? This is not query related by any stretch of the imagination. Jon and I, Jon's got an amazing amount of experience with AWS, with data engineering, data operations, specifically in the security realm. I've got a ton of experience building security teams, and what we found is that people were really, really, really screwing up data, right, Jon?
Yeah, I mean, it's almost kind of like the security industry does it out of spite. Sometimes it feels like where they just don't know how to operate with it, and it's like a pendulum of like centralize, decentralize, right? Like what's that dumb meme format with the guy on the gatehouse on the castle?
Yeah.
Like centralize everything in the sim, decentralize it, centralize it in the lake. But
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
data be hard.
Data be hard.
Data do be hard though.
And John and I have differing opinions on this. John is very much in the camp of, you security people need to learn SQL. And I'm like, John, that's not realistic.
I mean, I've come off of that a little bit. I always reserve the right to change my mind on opinions, and it's, I don't know. I mean, I feel like we would need two streams to talk about what I really think about what we're doing to professionals in the industry. I'm talking about all access, right? On the different capability sets that people service, the different sub disciplines of security, as well as the different maturity levels and seniority and whatnot. And as a whole, as an industry, I think we're just failing people. So that's why I like doing the SecDataOps stuff, being able to talk to folks and just help them out, right? Because look, you really can't blame people who don't know. It's not like anybody was learning any of this stuff, because it's not like we had a huge data issue, not even a decade ago, really, right? Some people like to say that we did, but it's nowhere near as bad as it is now.
Do you think that you think it was a decade ago that we were? I would argue. I think, in my perspective, the data issue started probably closer to, I don't know, 2019, 2020 that's where I think the data issue started.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I would say maybe a little bit earlier. I think it was just a byproduct of, public cloud. As public cloud grew, obviously, more workloads are moving up there, more sources of logging, right? And we never really had that. Like if you wanted logging in a ESXi environment, a Hyper-V environment, on bare metal, on a colo, it was pretty much on you, right? Like, there was stuff like Sysmon and Windows event logs and different ways to get stuff out. And obviously you have Splunk kind of leading the way there all the way back in 2005, and then ArcSight and all those guys even before that, right? At the turn of the millennium. But I would say after CSPM kind of exploded, and then you had the big old security giants, not old as in antiquated, but older as like the more senior ones, right? Palo Alto, Cisco, Checkpoint, and all those folks started to acquire cloud tech and cloud companies. That's where we started to see it, and now it's just rapidly increased about how much worse it's gotten. So that's where we have a security tool for
Speaking of cloud, John, you just reminded me, we couldn't have a SecDataOps or even a cloud-related stream if we didn't talk about the news this week.
Oh, yeah.
So, Chad, if you hadn't heard, if you happen to be off of LinkedIn, for any amount of time, Google has set to acquire Wiz. I would argue, again, because they seem to have been on this roller coaster before, and it didn't work out well for them last time. But Google is set to acquire Wiz yet again. John, you have worked at a company that was attempting to be a competitor to Wiz. You thoroughly like what Wiz is doing. You're a huge fan of CSPM and just cloud security stuff. What is your take on Google Wiz joining forces?
It was the right timing for both of them, for sure. Wiz is almost mythical, right? In a way that you never have seen before in this industry, where just, and there are people who talk about like, oh, is it all marketing? Is it all hype? I mean, first off, the tech and the vision was, they knocked it out of the park, right? Like the whole thing, agentless snapshot scanning, really commoditizing and doubling down on CSPM, expanding out the host-based protections, being able to protect SaaS as well as PaaS and public cloud at the same exact time without having to do cumbersome sort of agents, and just, the whole chic and mystique around it. You never seen anything like that. But yeah, I was at Lightspin where we were trying to compete with Wiz, and, that didn't work out too well. We exited to Cisco. I forget how long it was. A few months before I joined here. So I don't know, June, May 2023.
Yeah, something like that.
I built tech that Wiz has used, the Dream Team at IHS Markit when I was running cloud and offensive security there before we were acquired by S&P Global. 13 of us who never touched a graph before built what I still maintain is the finest graph security tool ever.
Not biased at all. Not biased at all.
No, I mean, I'm not. Like, we did it better than Wiz did. Wiz took a while to even get on a Neptune, and they still had a Rapid and GraphQL, which is a bit crazy to me. But either way, technical stuff aside, I think it was the right timing for both of them.
Yeah.
Google is coming off the back of that 21-month integration of Mandiant.
Yeah.
They've also been slowly transforming Chronicle to Google SecOps and, getting it to be a bit better. And I have my opinions on Google SecOps as well, as a SIEM and as a SOAR platform, but that's neither here nor there. I think it makes sense for both of them. Wiz, I'm not their CFO, but IPOing, especially in this kind of like uncertain, sort of scary geopolitical economic environment, I don't know, probably not a smart idea. And I don't think they had the revenue, to be quite honest, to get there, right? Like, you need billions. And without selling hardware like Palo or Cisco does, it's hard to get there. But at the same token, it makes a lot of sense for Google. They're still the... Oh, no, go ahead. Sorry.
I was going to say, like, you speak of memes. You talk about memes, and I saw one. I did not source this meme. I did see this meme out there, though, but it was a plate, somebody eating some food that was on a plate, and they had the graphic for Google SecOps on top of the plate, and then it had, like, somebody putting a Wiz logo on top of it, where it was like, what are you doing, Google? You haven't finished what's on your plate yet.
I mean, it's not wrong. There's a lot of stuff that's wrong with Google SecOps that I think they'll probably use this as an accelerator, because it makes sense for both, right? Not just from IPO versus not just from needing to deploy capital from Google's perspective, right? Because they've been sitting on a boatload of cash, and Google Cloud is like the most insignificant part of Google's portfolio, right? I mean, they make a lot more money with hardware, with the Pixel. They make a lot more money with pretty much everything else, right? Search, ads, workspace, Gmail, and whatnot than they do on the security and cloud side. But they're stuck as the clear number 3. I think, you look at any sort of analysis from like 451, from Forrester, from Gartner, from other consortiums, right? Be it security, DevOps focused, IT focused. It's always like, GCP has anywhere from like 10 to 15% market share. Yeah. And they brought in a guy from Oracle to try to expand that. OCI's old CEO, I think, or business leader, however Oracle does it. So this helps them capture a bunch of useful insights about the other clouds. Yeah. It helps them get other cloud users at least to GCP. Because now if you're a full AWS shop, a full Azure shop, a full OCI, a full Linode, a full Snowflake shop, only using freaking Wiz, well, now you have to have at least one Google account. This deal's going to take forever to close.
But let's be honest, though. I think this is why I think SecDataOps is so relevant. There aren't a lot of people that only have one of those. Now, I mean, I worked at a company in the past where they refused to do business with a certain cloud provider because they thought it was competitive. But let's be honest, not everybody just has one cloud provider these days.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to, right? Especially when it comes to like the enterprise security side of the house. It's like, you're not going to go with AWS managed directory service. You're not going to, AWS is, they tried that, right? In like in the early days of cloud, right? Like, so 17, 18, 19, they tried it with Workmail. They tried it with WorkDocs. They tried to have Exchange compatible things to compete with Exchange, and just didn't work. Azure was super, super slow with Azure AD and now Entra ID, but I think M365 has pretty much solidified itself as like, there's hardly anywhere to go to have a complete platform. With this, Google gets pretty damn close. They tried with the Google Cloud Security Command Center. That thing was hot garbage. Yeah. And then on top of that, they charge you to use it. So it's like, I'm going to charge you to eat hot garbage. That's a crazy business prep to me, but okay.
And my hate for anybody who upcharges security features cannot be understated in that whole conversation.
Especially since it's just CSPM. I mean, like, between Prowler, Cloud Custodian, Electric Eye, and even Scout Suite, you have 4 really, really formidable open source security tools that cover 3 platforms or more. I mean, with Electric Eye, I think I have up to 8 now, SaaS and public. Tony and Prowler aren't far behind me, but they're cheating because he has a company now. He's publicly funded. I'm just one dude, right? So,
and that chat is the story of open source software right there.
Yes, yes. But I don't know. It makes sense. And I mean, if you think of it, like now you have a dedicated IR MDR wing at Google with Mandiant. You have a dedicated SIM XDR-ish SOAR platform with Google SecOps Chronicle.
Yeah.
I still call it Chronicle.
Yeah.
You have now kind of like the leader in CSPM and, you know, kind of cloud DevSecOps sort of things with a little bit of other, you know, random bits and pieces with Wiz, you know, that gives them a better vuln management story, right? Because Google didn't have a equivalent for Inspector. Now they have a CTEM story. They didn't really have an equivalent with that. And then if you take the old stuff that was really hard to use in Google, like their web application security scanner, Google has a DAS tool that nobody knows about. They have a really good WAF. They have a really good identity aware proxy that, you know, in some ways is a little bit better than Zscaler or ZIA for Google workloads, right? They have workload identity federation, which is better than AWS with IAM role anywhere. And then they also have cloud DLP. So imagine rolling all that in a Wiz, and now you could put that stuff and deploy it against AWS, against Linode, against OCI, against Azure. You know, that becomes really, really sticky. And now you have to, you know, think to yourself, it's like, maybe I should go all in with Google Workspace. You have all the enterprise security features there. You have all the logging there. And then now you have everything else. And just think of the data exhaust and how they're going to bring it to bear. So it'll be really interesting to watch how Google kind of plans this out, what they do with kind of I think it's 4 co-founders from Wiz, right? You have Asaf, everybody knows. You have Yanan, and I forget the names of their 2 other kind of execs. And where they put them in Google and how Google integrates them and what business unit they put it in is going to be, you know, it's going to be really telling. But to folks waiting to hear about that, don't worry about this for another 2 years. It's a lot of money, a lot of scrutiny between, you know, the economic and tax situation in Israel, plus the EU, plus the US, and the various like securities and oversights committees that have to look at this. It's going to take forever to close. It took them 22 months to close Mandiant, and that was a $5.4 billion deal with Mandiant divesting a lot of stuff on the way out. This is even bigger.
The politics, and I don't mean like the politics, just the unwinding that a transaction of this size has to happen. John's 100% right. Like don't look for anything substantial for 2+ years or so for something like that. As you can tell, John's got a lot of thoughts on this. If you got questions in chat about this deal, if you use either Google or Wiz, drop those questions in the chat. We'll pump them in there. We'll answer them. John, I did want to get us back today and chat. You know, kind of a little bit off topic, but we're talking about the Google Wiz stuff. But a couple months back, John and I had sat down here and we had talked to you guys about a workshop that we had been doing for a lot of our clients called a SecDataOps workshop, where John and I go on site and chat with our clients and, you know, try to help them see world where, you know, the focus is very much heavily based on, you know, security data, where that security data is stored, how that security data is used in security operations. And we've created, John and I created this 3-phase workshop that we've implemented now for several clients that kind of goes through and does an assessment, does some analysis, and then finally, you know, writes a report that we end up giving over to our client, and basically, you know, give them, you know, a strategy and a roadmap for how do they become a more SecDataOps centric type of organization. And John and I are both passionate about this, and that's why we wanted to come on stream and we wanted to talk about it, is because we think that this is knowledge that everybody can benefit from. It doesn't require a John or an I, although it, you know, it certainly helps. And we're here to kind of help you, you know, see and understand the world of SecDataOps a lot more. You know, it's definitely not something that is proprietary to Query. It's definitely not something that, you know, can't be shared with the rest of the world. And so that's why we've come here and we've decided that now's the right time. You know, it's been a little bit longer than we wanted it to be, but John and I decided that now was the right time for us to come back and talk about kind of like phase 2, if you will, of the workshop, John, the analysis phase.
Uh-oh.
Well, I mean, it helps that it's relatively fresh in our mind. Jon and I just recently came off of an engagement with this, and so I felt like it was a good opportunity, Jon, for you and I to sit down and while it was still really, really fresh in our mind. So I'm going to hit you with the first question, Jon. You know, we obviously came back from an engagement. We had processed a lot of information from this engagement. What was kind of that information download like for you? You know, how did you kind of like start to like have that like, holy cow, this is what the environment looks like type of mentality in that engagement?
Yeah, I think for this one, because we've done a few of these now, this one we did it really well, you know, having kind of the shared doc, but then also me with my freaking sketchbook walking around like I'm a tax collector, right? Like that really helped. It's like processing the information as it comes in, right? Like, you know, we were kind of, like we talked about in the first stream, like you have to be like part corporate psychologist, part like pro sci change manager, part intel analyst, right?
Yeah.
All source. So this time around, it wasn't as overwhelming, but like most of the times it's like, holy crap. But all of them have a holy crap thing. So I think we were better prepared, but it was still a lot given the size of them.
Yeah. I definitely always come back from these. And one of the things that I love about doing these types of consulting things, Jon, I don't know if you share this sentiment or not, and I say this on stream to chat frequently, is the things that you get to see when you go to other organizations and see how they're doing whatever it is you happen to be consulting on, it gives you a greater appreciation, I think, for just how different security is for most organizations when you get to see the nuances from company to company.
Yeah, no, I do enjoy seeing that, because even we learn from time to time, right? Like where it's like, oh, you know, they might have a certain way of collecting logs, of processing things. They might use certain tools in certain ways, or they might have held on to like what you might consider legacy tech to be like, oh, wow, like, you know, they really operationalized around it. I definitely like that. You know, what do you do when you come back from these? Because like, I didn't even look at the notes.
It was 3 days before I even looked at the notes. Like processing just the sheer volume of information that we took in, was immense, right? And so like I didn't even look at the notes for 3 days. I just kind of like processed everything.
Yeah, no, same. I mean, like I touched on, we did a better job for sure of this one. I feel like every one we do, we say, hey, this is our best one yet. Right. But that's the fun part about it.
Yeah. we learned so many different ways to ask this question. So let's kind of talk about that. Let's kind of talk about that a little bit from an analysis perspective. I think what's hard to convey to chat sometimes, and let's see if you can do it, Jon, is we have in our head these decades of experience of doing these things that we've done, and somehow we need to come into an organization and we need to ask questions of people to pull information out of them that helps us to see the picture that we're trying to solve for. So what is your thought process as we're sitting there interviewing somebody, as we're sitting there interviewing a SOC analyst or a threat hunter or an intelligence person or a CISO or whatever the case is? What's your thought process in terms of how do you interview them to get out the things that you're trying to get answers to in an engagement?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I think it's trying to phrase it in a way that they understand, right? Because like we talked about in the first stream, you end up talking to everybody from the CISO, deputy CISO, down to like boots on the ground, you know, tier one, quote unquote, or level one, or, you know, triage folks. So it's really just trying to contextualize the questions around what they do day to day, but asking it in a way that like it just kind of makes sense for them to answer. But and also asking things that are relevant to them, right? Like obviously, you know, and this is more than just like, don't ask the triage guys like how CTI develops PIRs as a CTI team. But at the same token, you know, triage, CERT, threat hunters, CTI, red teamers, insider risk people, they're all going to have like their different workflows and whatnot. Mm-hmm. So it's all about trying to ask stuff that's going to be, you know, relevant to them in a way that might be familiar to them, if that makes sense. And that takes a lot of finesse, honestly, and doing it a lot. And it's helpful having you there. And we had a special guest with us too, right? We had one of our sales reps, or well, not sales reps, sales leaders with us. So having the three of us with our collective experience kind of like riff and ask questions. And it's also two-way, right? It's not like an interrogation where they sit down and answer it. It's, a lot of times they'll be like, hey, what the heck does that even mean? Why'd you ask me that? I do like the "why did you ask me that" question. So, right? Like, wait a second. Yeah. Why? Why do you want to know that?
Yeah.
Who have you been talking to?
Yeah. And I think that kind of speaks to what Cybertize is asking here, right? Which is about bouncing, giving each other pointers or how to digest information or things like that. Because I do think that there's it is one of those things where it's almost good cop, bad cop-ish when Jon and I are in these rooms, where it's kind of like I'll hear Jon going down a line of questioning and it gives it. This may sound terrible. This may sound highly manipulative. If it does, I apologize for this. Kind of, not really. Hashtag not sorry. When Jon is asking questions and the person we're interviewing is answering, I get to put on a very analytical hat and listen to those responses. I get to watch the body language of folks around the table who are responding to questions. And it kind of gives me an opportunity to see, are there other threads that I want to pull on? Does somebody leak something that maybe they didn't mean to leak? And I don't mean that from like oh my God, you told us something secretive, but did they say something? And you're kind of like, well, hold on for a second. If I dive into this, does this get me an answer that I didn't have access to before? And so it allows you to kind of play off of each other and have that like good cop, bad cop type of mentality during that interview process.
Yeah, no, definitely. And the other way, it's just direct feedback too, because as we come from here, sometimes we don't have a lot of time with the folks who might be interviewing, right? Maybe 30 minutes, 40 minutes, maybe even less than that. It's like in a hallway. Yeah. So it's always like, hey, you should have asked that. Or, feedback that you give me too, where I just get like overexcited, like way down the weeds. And you're like, hey, like you just absolutely killed those guys. Like they had no idea what you're asking, what you're talking about. Right. So that's the other way, how you always have the continuous improvement in place. And that's really what SecDataOps is kind of about. It's about capturing, really the spirit, the essence, however you want to say that, of continuous improvement. So even as us from the consulting side, when we do these, there's always that measure of it. So I'm, fortunate that we get to pair off and then sometimes have extra people with us, be it our executive sponsor or, somebody from the sales organization or, somebody else.
So let's talk about that. Let's talk about that continuous improvement. Let's talk about that analytics phase a little bit. So we digested a ton of information. You and I came back. We sat down and we started to put pen to paper to really kind of think about what we just saw. What are some of the first things that you're trying to answer in these workshops when you come to try to provide a SecDataOps recommendation to folks based on your experience?
Yeah, no, for sure. We touched on this in the first stream. It's been so long. You should definitely go rewatch it. I need to go rewatch it, right? Because, maybe I've changed my mind since then. But the whole, kind of my go-to saying, right, that I got from my old boss at IHS Market, the what, the so what, the what next. Anytime we're brought in to do one of these, there's a reason, right? There's a what. It's like, hey, we're migrating from SIM to SIM to lake. We want to improve our detection engineering capabilities. We want to improve our intelligence processing and dissemination capabilities. Whatever it is, it's like going to re-review that. Mm-hmm. First off, it's like that what and the so what, like, all right, what are the pressures, right? Is it, internal politics? Is it cost? Is it maturity? Is it post-blast from an incident? Whatever it is, it's like, did we answer that for them? Did we find out enough information about that? So that's usually the first part of the analysis that I try to do. And then right after that, it's like, okay, if we had enough information to read back to them, right? Because it's like the what and the so what, it's like, hey, because of cost, we have to move SIM to SIM. Can you guys help us evaluate? Then I take that kind of mental, load that disk in the old, brain, the 4-pound anxiety machine in my skull. And the thing that I always start with is the data flow diagram, right? Yeah. Because that really lays it out. And that's the most fun part. But before I answer a little bit more, what's your favorite part of doing the report? Like your favorite section of it or whatnot?
Yeah. And I want to before I answer that, because favorite part of the report said no person ever. I think what Jon hits on is super important, because I think that is step one to that analysis phase, right? Is going back to your mission. Why were you brought into this engagement in the first place? What were the goals and objectives of this engagement? What were the pain points that brought you in for your expertise in the first place? That's definitely something that first couple of hours, first 4 hours when you start to do that analysis phase is very much like, okay, what was I brought here to do? What are some of the things that are super important for these folks to get out of this engagement? And then I would turn around and look at that data and go like, okay, of everything that we gathered as part of this engagement, did I gather enough of the things to help me make that assessment that we covered everything that we needed to cover? Because I don't know about you, Jon, but I absolutely hate going back to the client side and saying like, hey, I meant to ask you this question, or can we spend 30 or 40 extra minutes with this team, or blah 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 blah. I think that there's like that's call me snooty, maybe it's my old Big Four consulting days, but like that shows a high level of unpreparedness on your part during the execution phase. And so I definitely try to do a lot of analysis on the data we gathered to make sure that we gathered enough data to answer the customer's questions.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, I agree with you. I think it makes you just look crazy and unprepared. I mean, there are some exigent circumstances, right, where it's like, hey, this leader, this person wasn't there. But unless it's like, I mean, we've never done one of these with like somebody who's super small, right? So it's somebody all says a deputy, right? We've never, a one person shop isn't probably going to do one of these unless they're getting ready to hire a team. That's always a good reason to do it, especially if you're like building a security program. But yeah, I don't want to come back, but going back to the answer, right? It's like going over that mission statement, over that thesis, that hypothesis, whatever it was. But the data flow diagram for me, because I'm kind of more representative of the data in the tech side, it's like digesting all that tech catalog down. And no matter what the mission set is, whatever we get brought in for, that's always a deliverable that we produce. Yep. But it's an important artifact because it could kind of just lay everything out for you. And not a lot of organizations have this, right? We have yet to run into somebody where it's like, hey, do you have like a full data flow diagram, principal design diagram, control flow diagram of every single thing, all the widgets, all the logs, all the tech, all the repos? We've never had that.
That's a great point to talk about, because I do think that is you bring that up, and yes, I do think that this one was pretty unique in the sense that there was a lot of complexity to this particular one, and the data flow diagram, I think, as part of our analysis phase, putting that data flow diagram into place, I think was absolutely key in framing how we wrote the report to solve the answer. So I think that's something we should definitely not overlook is visualizations, especially in security organizations, not just from an architecture perspective, but a data flow perspective, a personnel perspective, I think are immense in analyzing any current state of any security org.
Yeah, exactly. And even if we don't get brought in specifically, right, like, oh, help me with my detection engineering or whatnot, we could always talk about that in the report, right? Because when you have all the personnel laid out, when you have all the tech laid out, and you connect the personnel to the tech like we did for this one, right, where it's like, oh yeah, we have like 20 tools for contextualization, but this group uses 5 of them, this group uses another 5, this group uses 10, but they don't actually use them, they just suck them and then move the data somewhere else. It's like, well, why? Is that at least the money? Is there some efficiencies? If all of you are using different tools to get the same context, obviously the context isn't the same. So that's the favorite part, my favorite part of it. It's funny because it goes in the appendix, but then so much of the report, of the recommendations, of the findings, of our like initial kind of gut assessment, like, hey, your Lakehouse, your SIM, whatever, your mobility platform, this is what we think of it. And then we could go back and then show them that. And that's why, I think this one went good, because we kept drawing them. Yeah. And me personally, I don't know, man, like I like having just a menial task like that, because I'm in so much stuff, just like you are day to day, right? I could be writing social content, doing product marketing, doing deep R&D, testing with engineering, front and back end. And it's like, oh, now you just need to make sure that everything's aligned left and have all the arrows. Yeah. It's like it makes it brings my brain to a happy place where it's just like, ooh, everything looks nice and lined up.
Well, and so again, just we talk about the differences in Jon and I in terms of how we execute these workshops. What I love about working with Jon is that, like, during the entirety of the workshop, we'll rabbit hole here with this one just a little bit. During the entirety of the workshop, I have a Visio up. And I'm drawing in a Visio because that is my medium for visualizing organizations. Jon draws on a notepad with a pen and a paper, like a sketch pad that you'd get from, Hobby Lobby or something like that.
Exactly where I got it.
What is it, Jon? What is it about you that feels that is a better medium for you to visualize? Whenever we do these engagements, what is it that makes that a better medium for you?
Yeah, I think this goes to like adult education theory, right? But I've always been I don't know what you would call it, but I'm better at it now, like when somebody talks about something, but really for me to like actually download it into my archives to, write that iceberg table in my mind, I have to write it down. And, I have old notebooks, like when I was just a project manager, or then a product manager. Even when I was first running cloud and offensive security, I was just writing everything down and having that kind of tactile, brain muscle connection, whatever you want to call it. Yeah. I don't even know what to call it. It's just, for me, that's what helps me, know where to put things around. But then also, it also shows where there's blanks, right? Where I could like write it out of memory. I'm like, oh crap, like there's a whole blank spot here. We probably didn't ask enough questions. We didn't ask enough things. But also, I don't know, there's something not imposing. I don't know what the right word is, but like when I'm sitting there sketching and you just kind of shove it across the table and it's like, does this look right? And then see people's reaction. They're like, holy crap, pen and paper.
Yeah.
Why didn't you get the LLM to make this?
but at the same time, like, I think the reason I rabbit holed there is because like I want Chad to walk away from like there's no right or wrong to it, right? It works for Jon, in the way that works for him, just like what works for me works in a different way. And so like, I think Jon hit on something that I think is super important, which is, you're doing whatever it is that you can so that when you get to that analysis phase, any gaps that you've got in your mindset, any gaps that you've got in that network diagram, any gaps that you've got in the questions that you asked, you hopefully can get those addressed before you get too far away from being able to ask those questions. So that was why I pulled that one back together. So we spent some time. We did the diagram. We started to analyze the data. Let's talk a little bit about the way that you consume the data so that you can make the recommendations that you want to make, right? What are some of the things that you're looking for? Like, I don't know. I'm asking this question because obviously I'm trying to ask it in a way that doesn't make it sound like it's something that I do. But obviously I've got my expertise. And so I'm looking to give assessments and recommendations based on my expertise. And so I'm looking at that data and I'm analyzing it in a way that allows me to highlight the recommendations that I want to make. What are some key technical values that you're looking for that kind of triggered you like, aha, this is a recommendation I would make. Aha, this is where your strategy is incorrect and this is where I want to move you to. What are some of those technical things that you're looking for in that analysis phase that help drive those recommendations that you give to clients?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, the most important part of SecDataOps is the ops piece, right? And I ask a ton of questions about that, right? SLAs, SLIs, SLOs, KPIs.
With regards to data or across the entire security org?
With regards to data, but also of security as well, because they have to be in lockstep, right? Like SecDataOps is all about enabling security outcomes, better decision support, better decision making, tuning false positives, true negatives, whatever it is. It has to relate to the data. So when I ask these metrics-based questions, it's, about the data too, but then it's also the understanding and how close they are to operationalization, right? Because no matter what the what, and the so what is, whatever mission we get brought in for at the end of the day, they still need to buy into SecDataOps. I mean, that's why it's called the SecDataOps workshop, right? Like they understand that it's like, hey, about interoperating those two, having them on kind of the same level plane. So that's what I look for a lot, as well as articulation of the tech that they have, right? And it's not so much like, oh, you guys don't use the latest and greatest data lake house table format, right? Like, you're not using Delta Lake, you're going to die in the streets. It's none of that. It's more, is there a clear articulation for why a tech was chosen?
Yeah.
And also, is there like duplicate, triplicate of tech? And we've seen that a lot.
Yeah.
And sometimes just like, oh, for bigger companies that might grow by M&A, that's one thing where, like, yeah, it's not too uncommon to find that they have multiple data repositories, right? But at the same token, sometimes tools are brought in for POCs by different leaders, by different teams, all trying to solve the same thing. So those go into my recommendations, not just, obviously there's going to be tech recommendations, right? When it comes to data temperature, data utility, data retention, all stuff that we'll probably talk about in the time that we have left. But then it's also like, hey, you're missing metrics. You don't know how much data actually moves here. So you can't clearly, so if you don't know that, then why are we talking about cost, right? So it's just trying to like, I like out the recommendations.
I like one thing you said there, and I want to highlight that for chat.
Just
was you pulled my line out. You pulled my line out of that one. Just one. You had said, like, we try not to chastise folks that we do this workshop with based on the technology that they've chosen. Every piece of technology was chosen for a reason. I think part of the analysis, and I think what makes what it is that we do so critical, is that we don't do judgment based on what their decisions are. We either try to understand so that we can help them make better decisions, or see what we can plus one on top of these decisions. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, that's the freeing part of doing, even though we're doing this like as workers, right, for our employer, it's not so much that we're doing it trying to steer them towards using our tech or whatnot. And I think that's where people run into trouble with, the big four or other consulting companies, right? And I get it. Look, people have to make money. But a lot of the time, these workshops, these assessments are predicated upon, they probably have a channel partner that gets them a discount on like a specific SIM or an EDR, right? So they're always trying to gamify the recommendations. For us, it's like, I honestly couldn't give a crap less as long as you're able to fulfill SecDataOps mission sets with your tech. You could use Logarithm, you could use Splunk, you could use Sumo, you could use S3, you could use Azure Blob, DuckDB, Snowflake. I don't care. I could care less, honestly. It's like, can you articulate why you use the tech, and is it performant enough? And usually they already know the answer to that. They're like, yeah, we're not too happy with this platform. We're not too happy that we have 7 SIMs and 7 lakes, right?
Yeah.
Which is, we'll go into other recommendations, and sometimes the recommendations write themselves. But that also goes back to what we talked about in the first part. It's like, hey, do you guys have any expectations of what you want in this readout? And a lot of the times our executive sponsors, or representative department heads, whatever it is, they usually all have in their mind something collective like, yeah, like, we know this is jacked up, so like, can you highlight it for our leadership or something like that?
I think that's, I think that's what I love about doing these, is that, folks are coming to us for our recommendations, folks are coming to us for our perspective, and I feel like Jon makes a great point, not just one, but in this particular case, I caveated it, Jon, for you.
Got me.
We have to build a lot of trust, Jon and I, to where we're going to be able to give them an opinion that isn't directly tied to a technology recommendation simply because they brought us in as part of query. And I think that's always like, it's an unspoken challenge that we have when we go to do these types of assessments and workshops with customers, is like, hey, we're here to give you our opinion. And you can always tell that that's successful, because when we get to the end of a workshop, when we get to the end of an engagement, we obviously give our perspective on, how the week went, or, thoughts and ideas. And then they turn around to us, Jon, and they say, so outside of this, tell us what else you saw that you want to comment on. And I think that, I don't know about you, Jon, but that gives me a huge sigh of relief to go like, okay, we've built trust. They trust our recommendations and our ideas. We're free to speak to all the things that we saw when we looked at their particular organization.
Yeah, definitely. I remember us talking about it, and I deferred to you on a lot of it, during the engagements, we'll sort of live stream about talking about kind of like the organizational op tempo, the psychology, the geopolitics within a company, right? Not like, again, who you vote for, but like what makes a company tick.
Yeah.
And that's huge to me, even in the midst of the engagement, not just at the end when we talk to our sponsor or sponsors, but a lot of times, it's good when people know we're there and they're like, hey, like, can I talk to you guys for a second about like this one thing? And to me, it's a huge sigh of relief, right? Because the last thing you want to do is go on site and everybody's like, wow, this was just a massive freaking waste of time.
Yeah.
At least nobody's told us that to our face.
we can keep living that dream as much as we want to. We keep living that dream.
Yeah.
So John and I have tried to articulate analysis as best we can. Obviously, we're trying to obviously do so without tipping our hand too much about, engagements that we've been on and customer specific problems. But at the end of any of the analysis always comes recommendations. John, you are very, very opinionated when you write recommendations. I think anybody who's ever seen you on stream sees how opinionated you are. What is it? What do you think are some of your most stringent, you must do this to be successful at SecDataOps?
Yeah, I mean, like I touched on before, right? It's like metrics, like, metadata, not like just metadata from like what catalog do you use? But before you make any decisions, right, it's like, what data do you actually care about? And I mean that from what are your PIRs, if you have any, right, your priority intelligence requirements, what's your threat environment, what do your responders, what do your defenders, what do your red teamers, however you call them in the organization, like, how do they perform? What are they looking for? Do you have the metrics around like, hey, this data source has this much data. Yeah. This is the normal latency. Here's what we consider anomalous. Here's how we, actually stack rank the effectiveness, the efficacy of our controls, of our detection and engineering. Here's all the related KPIs and, SLAs that we have to care about. Like, we want to make sure that this thing has 9 nines of durability, or we want to make sure that, the latency is no greater than 15 minutes, or when we write to it, there's a bunch of things that go, and it is hard to answer it, right? Because it differs from organization to organization. But at the very least, they need to have kind of that top level strategic, like, well, why the hell are you writing 100 detection playbooks? Like, do any of them matter? And it's like, oh no, we're just playing MITRE ATT&CK bingo. It's like, well, stop that. That's dumb. But at the same time, it's like, oh, we want to do a SIM migration. We want to move to a lake. We want to move back to a SIM. We want to go another SIM. It's like, okay, cool. What are your data volumes? Like, oh no. And it's like, well, the recommendations write themselves because you need to know these things. And then again, some of the more recommendations at like the operational level, it depends what we get brought in for, right? They're like, hey, our detection engineering story is a mess. We're obviously going to write a bunch of recommendations around there. But for me, my no nonsense ones are like, you got to be able to operate with this data. So to do that effectively, you have to understand what it is, where it is,
I think,
does it bark, does it jump, does it quack?
I think it's fair to say we've not done one of these where the security team has zero concept of any metrics surrounding their data.
Yeah, I mean, everybody has an idea, but we've never seen it done 100% ironclad. And it's hard to do it, right? Like, and we tell them that. It's like, hey, these are some of like the kind of recommendations we give everybody, just so you're not surprised. And that's why we do multiple readouts too, right? Like the unofficial end of engagement, how's the week? Yeah. We do our nightly ARRs, after action reviews. Then we do like kind of the draft readouts, and we do the final readouts, and we do the final readouts with everybody, right? So for the most part, nobody ever does things perfect, but that's kind of the point, right? It all goes back to continuous improvement. But I also like being very pointed with the recommendations because, well, it's a recommendation. Like, it's not just like, oh, define metrics. Yeah. It's like, thanks, genius. No crap, define metrics. It's like, what metrics? Why? Yeah. And that's why we ask the questions we do. So we're able to articulate. It's like, hey, this is why you need to know the control flows. This is why you need to know your throughput and whatnot. And it all stack and relates, which is why we talk to so many damn people in security organizations, even to the point where, again, they're like, why are we talking? Yeah. Why are you asking us about PIRs? Why are you asking us about, how much detection content you have? Why are you asking us about MITRE ATT&CK? It's like, trust me, this is a secret tool we'll need later.
Where John's very, his non-negotiable really is around those data flows and those metrics around that. Like, I'll always defer. Maybe this is just where I've kind of come up in the industry. Are you protecting the organization, and do you have the information that you need to protect the enterprise? And so, like, I'll always look at the data that we've gathered, and I'll always look at, like, the way that we are looking to make recommendations to organizations is, are you architected in a way that best helps you quickly protect the organization? I think those are the things that I always look at in terms of my recommendations. I think we've seen organizations that have done okay-ish at that. I think, generally speaking, organizations know they have a data problem. Organizations are struggling to get the data that they need to protect their enterprises. And I would say that they make unnecessary security concessions around their data because they don't understand SecDataOps enough to architect it in a way that makes it better.
Yeah, no, 100%. And to your point about making sure that you have the right things at the right time, and really your watchwords, right, from your experience building big SOCs at places like, Abbott and Mondelez and whatnot, that where we converge, it's kind of like asking or recommending the same things for the same outcome, right? Because at the end of the day, it's like, why even bother with SecDataOps? It's, again, that decision enablement, being able to make the right decisions faster, more accurately, more effectively in a wider aperture than you may or may not, have otherwise really cared about or really thought about.
So that's roughly it from an analysis perspective. As you can see, John and I wanted to kind of come together and kind of talk through. I know it seems very esoteric, but on the analysis phase, there's a lot of, this is probably, when we think about consulting, this is probably the most artful part of what there is to do in consulting, because you're being asked to, and I mean, I would tell this to a level 1 analyst or an associate at PwC or something like that, is that, you're going to be asked to make some judgment calls based on your experience, based on the data that you've got around you, because people are looking to you to be an expert. And there's a lot of art, I believe, John, I don't know what your take is on this, but I think that there's a lot of art to being able to do the analysis phase, because it's more about how you take your experiences and match them to a customer environment more so than it is anything else.
100%. It's like 80% art, 20% science. Like, right, like I could wax poetic here about metrics, but
yeah,
even that will change, client to client, engagement to engagement. But the analysis it's the most exciting part, right, for both us and the end consumer of the report. But it's also the most difficult, which is why, like we talked about earlier, having to take like 3 days, a whole week before we even looked at it. Doing it in stages, right? Like we spent a lot of time between you and I reconciling the data flow diagrams and the different like org charts and whatnot. And then when we got done with that, we waited another week, and then it's like, okay, let's go write the rest of the report now.
Yeah. Great question from Hector in chat. You had talked earlier about doing after action reviews. We do these. We met every night. We meet every night, during engagements to talk about what we saw during the day, what we didn't see, what we want to focus on the next day. We've had after action reports, since engagements. We talk constantly about this stuff. What do you do to reflect and improve when it comes to these engagements?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it, those nightly ARRs that we do, over dinner, over drinks or whatnot, certainly help. And that's just from a bunch of different things, right? It's like, did we ask the right questions? Did we hit our own agenda? Did we ask too many questions? Did I yap? Did I say something crazy? I scare the customer again. But it's also at the end of the report, right? Like when we're writing them, it's like, I think you get a feel. And again, it's like really hard to get ironclad, like, yeah, I'm done with improving, right? Because every place is so different. But it also depends on the feedback. So I look almost towards the customer to almost give us free advice, right? Where they're like, oh, you talk too much about this. You didn't ask about this. You put this in and whatnot. But then it's also other folks, right? Like when we read in the sales, the GTM team, the customer success team, kind of post engagement, right? And getting their take on it to hear like, oh, why didn't you guys ask about this or whatnot? And obviously they have their own agendas and so forth. But definitely just, commiserating with you over it, looking over the notes, trying to improve, the small little improvements, right? Of like this time I brought a bigger notebook, right? Before I brought like a little tiny thing. This time I had the whole damn
You did.
Sketchpad.
You had the whole. You had like the big like Central Park, New York sketchpad thing going on this one. No, I think that's fair, right? I mean, it's like the biggest thing, like to answer this question very, very pointedly, what do you do to reflect and improve? Jon and I talk incessantly about this. I talked to Jon already. I feel like I talked to Jon so much, and we're a remote company. I talk to Jon probably on a daily basis, but obviously being on site with Jon, and this time we did have our head of sales with us, which, was interesting because, you obviously got Jon and I there from a technical perspective who are, trying to solve the SecDataOps questions, but then to have like a third party perspective out there. It was very interesting to have another voice to bounce off of. And so I'd say communication, talking, not being afraid to share what worked, what didn't work. Jon says like, where did he gap too much? Like, I mean, I think that's, Jon's being a little self-deprecating on that one, but I do think that there's a lot of opportunity to speak freely with clients. And so I think there's an opportunity that the conversations that happen nightly are where we get to sit down and say, we should dive into that more. We should dive into this more. We should pull this thread out. We should see where this rabbit hole goes. And that leads to more and more meetings. That leads to more and more data. That leads to more and more opportunity for analyzing the scenario.
Exactly, yeah. And I mean, I look towards Neal as the elder statesman because, well, I mean, he's physically older than me, but he's done this a lot more, right? Like my consultancy experience was limited to being a technical account manager, a TAM kind of, well, I better not call myself a solution architect, but I was a better SA than some of my SAs. And, your feedback definitely helps a lot with the engagements. And yeah, I mean, the only way for these to be successful, whether you're doing them internally to a company, if you're doing them as part of it, like a kind of SecDataOps joint task force, as I like to call them, or
that's your new favorite term. I've noticed that term has come up recently a lot with you.
Yes, joint task force. I mean, when I wrote the SecDataOps manifesto when I was a CISO at Lightspin, I did it that way kind of on purpose, right? You have all your stacks of like the different security subdisciplines. SecDataOps needs to live across all of it, right? Yeah. And then I think in the future, we will legitimately see like heads of SecDataOps or VP, director of SecDataOps, whatever, at security companies, like as a deputy CISO or somebody, in a level like that. But I mean, continuous improvement. Again.
I love the joint task force idea. I know this is something you floated here recently, and you and I have not had this back and forth. So we're going to venture a little bit. We'll have this back and forth on stream a little bit. Just since you brought it up, you opened the can of worms. We're going to do this live. Anytime, and I'm going to say this to you, but I want to couch this. I've got a good friend, AJ Nash, who, he was also, Intel in the military. He went on to work for Symantec, Anomaly, ZeroFox. We've had him on the stream several times. He's awesome. But one of the things I always give him crap for is that he's got this idea that we're going to see some chief threat intelligence officer. And so you said something that hits a nerve with me whenever somebody says, "Oh, we're gonna have a chief SecDataOps officer," that spans across the. I'm like, no, we will. I think that we will never have an individual who is tied specifically to SecDataOps. I think that my perspective on this, and I bring this up to you because I want you to fight me on this one, bro. I think that SecDataOps is a mindset that should be driven by policy and education and operationalness that is owned by the entire organization, and it can't be owned by a single person because it's so diverse. So that's my stance on what you just said about a singular person running it. Fight me on your perspective on it.
No, I mean what you said is true. First off, the whole thing of like a chief intelligence officer. Some folks have tried to make that happen a lot. I don't think this will ever live outside of a security organization or a shared services organization. But you're right. I mean, SecDataOps is more, and I even agonized over this going back and forth between like org charts and whatnot, and in the recommendations of the reports that we do here, and just in my own kind of content talking about what SecDataOps is. It is more culture than it is tech. It is more teamwork than it is individual. My thought of it is more, at the end of the day, somebody has to be accountable for it. So when I wrote about it in that manifesto, it was like, kind of more like, hey, the deputy CISO is kind of like the unofficial, sort of person who does it. And I only say that because, it wasn't too long ago where people said there would never be like security data scientists. And now like I see a ton of people with security data science titles and whatnot. But you are right. I do think at the end of the day, though, what will most likely happen is that it'll live as, a JTF or what have you, as some like dedicated function, steering committee, governance group. And maybe it's a PM, a portfolio manager or something like that within the security organization that owns it. Maybe the CISO owns it themselves. But I do say that it would take the right CISO to do that, because the CISO has so much in their remit, which is why I say like it needs to be kind of that deputy position where, there's just too much stuff, especially the bigger the company, the bigger the security organization. The CISO can't also be a security data expert. Like that's asking way too much. We'll kill more CISOs than we do already. And we kill a lot of them. And that's half joking, right? You understand the burnout of it. We've both done gigs at CISOs now. We both are good friends with and have met and worked with and consulted with big CISOs at like, Fortune 50 companies down to startup sizes. And it's an unforgiving damn position, which probably bears its own stream on its own.
With that being said, chat, let us know based on everything, especially if you're a longtime SecDataOps listener, let us know in the comments, let us know on the videos, let us know on LinkedIn. Do you agree or disagree? Should SecDataOps be its own person, or, should it stretch across multiple organizations? Let us know where you stand on that. Jon, always great to share the camera time with you, sir.
Likewise, man. I saw that a compliment got deleted for you in the chat. I don't know if you saw it, but
I probably one of the mods may have done it. Who knows? It's one of the things I don't pay too much attention to, but
I saw it. I was like, they're not talking about me.
Whatever. If a mod picked a comment that was taken out of context, then feel free to reach out to one of the mods to take care of. But with that being said, Jon, I'm gonna put you back in the green room. I'm gonna talk to my chat really quick, and we'll see you at work, unfortunately, here pretty soon.
Yeah. See you, man.
Great, awesome stream, fantastic. Always great to have Jon here. Hopefully you guys enjoyed that. We tried to talk as much as we could about some of the art that goes into that analysis for doing these types of workshops. So hopefully you got something out of that. I really enjoyed that. With that being said, we are going to be streaming tomorrow for Tea with a Hacker, so do make sure you tune in for our regularly scheduled Friday set of awesomeness. By the way, Jon, if you're still in the green room, your boss is showing up in my LinkedIn telling me, mocking us for how much we talked, so tell your boss to get back to work. With that being said, Tea with a Hacker tomorrow morning. Stay awesome. In 2 weeks, is 2 weeks the big one? No, 2 weeks is not the big one. In 4 weeks, we've got Fight Night here on SecDataOps. I'm super excited for Fight Night on SecDataOps. I'm going to have a CISO from one company with a CISO from another company, and they're going to take opposing views on AI in security organizations, and I'm going to pit them against each other, debate style, here on SecDataOps to talk about AI and security organizations. So make sure you do tune into that one, April 10th. Going to be super awesome. Excited for that one. With that being said, I'm going to go ahead and sign off for SecDataOps for this week. Make sure you guys tune in 2 weeks for the next SecDataOps. Make sure you tune in tomorrow for Tea with a Hacker. Make sure you tune in next Tuesday for Threat Brief. Whether you're on the red side or the blue side or still deciding, stay awesome. We'll see you next time.